Hello, and welcome to another Institute for Sound Public Policy podcast. I am your host, Kevin Lynn, and I'm also the executive director of the Institute. And today is Saturday, March 19th, 2025, the day before Easter Sunday. And I have a wonderful guest who's no stranger to the podcast. It's Steve Lamb. Steve Lamb is not only a very good friend of mine, he's also the chairman of the Institute. And today, Steve is going to be sharing something deeply personal. You see, Steve lives in Altadena, California, and late last year is when the fires swept through Los Angeles County. He and his wife, Jeanette, lost their home, and it was really tragic. They literally lost everything they own. Now, Steve, having been a town councilman for over 20 years, in the unincorporated city of California, of Altadena, California, has some really unique insights as to what really led to this massive devastation, but also is living the nightmare of trying to rebuild his life. And so it's great to have Steve here. I'm really looking forward to talking to him about several things. I want to look at things like the failure of policies that led to the devastation. How are there criticisms of the first responders? And several other topics I really want to cover that we'll get into. So without any further ado, Steve, welcome to the show.
It's good to be with you, Kevin. It's happy Easter time.
Yes, it is. It is. I wish the circumstances were better for you, Steve. I can only imagine, and I believe you're not coming to us from your usual studio there in Altadena, but your mother-in-law's home, where you are temporarily housed.
Mother's house. My mother's house.
Oh, your mother's house, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, Steve. Wow, just amazing. As I informed the audience before you came on, you lost your home of 37 years. And what I'd like to do, Steve, before we get into our interview, I'd like to show some photos of your home, because it was an amazing utopian type home and very unique, like many of the structures that were lost in the Altadena fires. And then kind of look at some, sadly, after shots of it. So here we go. I'm going to kind of take us on a photo safari here.
Okay.
All right. Just want to make sure.
That's the backyard.
That's the backyard. Okay.
That's looking from my studio through the avocado tree. The avocado tree was actually given to Carl Curtis, who was the original owner, by Pompano. Pompano was the guy who hybridized all the industrial avocados that we use today. And this was one that didn't work. It had skin that was very too thin and small little fruit, but they were delicious. They tasted like walnuts, and the fruit was very, very dense.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So the next shot is a shot through the window. There's two of these I have. But again, that's a shot.
In the kitchen.
Mm-hmm. Onto the backyard.
It's in the kitchen. And Jeanette used to, that's the front yard. That's the front view. So that's the old fence and the house. And then in back of the house, you can see in the distance my studio building.
Gotcha. And I do have a shot of that here. That's another shot of the inside. That's your kitchen. Obviously, you're doing some work there.
Yeah, I had just put an island in.
Oh, really? Wow, just put an island in. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
And then that's your studio, right?
That's the studio. And it was burned out by an arsonist when we were fighting the Lavinia project, and my brother and I rebuilt it. And we rebuilt it kind of as a sort of Frank Lloyd Wright style Usonian building. So we deepened the extension of the eaves. Mm-hmm. I built all the doors and windows in it myself. It's all clad in redwood inside and out.
Wow.
And right there, that's a a frame I built for a series of 3 planters, and the planters were actually inspired by Frank Lloyd Wright's Midway
Oh, I
Gardens.
think I have a
They were,
picture of the planters. Here we go.
yeah, that's without them in the frames. Yep,
Okay.
yep.
Wow. Wow. And you are a Frank Lloyd Wright scholar, Steve.
Well, I'm a scholar of modern American architecture, yes.
Wow.
And of course, everything emanates from Wright. More of Jeanette's orchids. She had 60 orchid plants. That's our
60.
favorite cat. Yeah.
Wow. And he looks right at home there.
He does. He's not with us anymore.
And another shot from the outside.
Yeah.
And another.
That's a that's a shed I made in the side yard. And you see on the ends of the purlin rafters there, there's copper caps.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very interesting. Everything that had a copper cap on it did not burn in the fire.
Oh, really?
So the ends of those fell off the 4x4s and were unburned with the copper shells encasing them.
Wow.
Yep.
Interesting. A shot of your front door.
Yep.
Another kitty cat.
Yep.
The driveway
That's the
coming
gate.
in.
Yep.
And then a shot from. Is that the living room, Steve?
That's the living room, shot from the living room. Now,
Wow.
our house was very weird. Our house originally was a bunk house for the Carl Curtis Ranch. Carl grew vegetables and chickens and eggs for hotels in Pasadena. Then he decided Russian wolfhounds were a more financially viable business. So, like 40% of the Russian wolfhounds in America still are descended from dogs that were raised on my ranch or our ranch. And then he had a Chinese cook, and when the Chinese cook managed to get married, he took and added on to the original bunkhouse 2 more rooms, one room that we used as our bedroom and the kitchen, and gave it to him. And when I was a young lad of about 8 years old, I used to go to the little branch library across the street, and I'd check out an Encyclopedia Brown mystery book, and I would go sit on a rock in front of that house and eat carob pods and read the mystery book. And his widow, the little old Chinese lady, used to come out and give me lemonade because I was a good boy who was going to grow up to be a scholar. And so so I knew
Wow. It
her.
sounds like, Altadena. And again, you're a fifth generation Altadenan. It seemed like an amazing culture.
Altadena was a very difficult place to describe because it had everybody in it. I mean, very, very wealthy international executives, all the way down to well, addicts, and we had everybody in between. And sort of the Altadena rule was anybody could live in our town as long as you weren't really normal. You had to be a little bit eccentric to live in Altadena. And yeah, so we had everybody. I mean, it was a really strange thing. Like, we had Black Panthers and we had Ku Klux members, and they would go to barbecues together in the neighborhood because, well, yeah, the Ku Klux guy didn't like black people, and the Black Panther didn't like crackers, but well, that's George, and he's my neighbor, and he's a good guy, even though he's all those other things. And
Wow.
that was kind of
Interesting.
the culture of Altadena was, you leave your neighbors alone, you let them be who they are as individuals, and you just kind of get along on a human level.
And there's something the country can learn from that. I'd like to think so. But
Yeah.
that may not be, Altadena may not have the opportunity to teach us that going forward, because there's really 5 things that I would like to cover today with you, Steve.
Okay.
One is I'd like to first talk about the failure of California state government policies.
Okay.
2, actual fire department failures that you witnessed, and more.
Yep.
Also, there are some structural and endemic problems with the whole California utility system, because I guess Edison is being blamed for this fire, and they were blamed for others. Also, talk about policy barriers to rebuilding that are going on now that you're experiencing, living through with thousands of others.
Right.
And then the big question, to rebuild or not to rebuild?
Yeah, okay. I'd love to talk about all those since that's all I've thought about for the last 101 days.
101, yeah, think about it.
Yeah,
Wow. So
yeah.
let's talk about the failure of California policy, Steve.
Well, we have to start off with the history. And the native people to the San Gabriel Valley, which Altadena is a part of, were called the Tongva people, Native Americans, and they used to practice prescriptive burns. They would burn out areas of the mountains and the brush on a regular sort of rotating basis. They did that partly to get game, but partly because the flora and fauna have evolved in this area so that they cannot regenerate without fire. So, like all of our pine trees, about half of our chaparral cannot reproduce unless there's a fire. Their seed pods do not open unless there's a fire. So the Mission Padres came along. They enslaved the Tongva people. And about 30 years after that, Los Angeles started having these epic fires. And literally things would burn in large stripes, if you looked at a map, from the mountains all the way to the ocean. And that was because of the tremendous fuel load. And so there was this guy named Theodore Lukens, and he was friends with this other guy who was an Indian ethnologist who started the Southwest American Indian Museum. And he found out that the native people used to do these prescriptive burns to like keep the fire load down so that it wouldn't burn all the way to the ocean. So he spent a couple decades of his life getting the Forest Service started. The United States Forest Service actually started originally as a county forest. The Angeles National Forest, which is the first forest, started first as a county forest, then it was taken over by the state, then it was taken over by the feds. And they did prescriptive burn. And from roughly 1900 until 30 years ago, we had the fire. I mean, we still had fires because they're part of the natural cycle here, but we had those under control. We didn't have the huge fuel loads that we experience in these fires now. But what happened is the South Coast Air Quality Management District decided that they were going to prevent smog, and they decided to take on to themselves the authority to decide whether or not the United States Forest Service could do prescriptive burns, and they haven't issued a permit for 25 years. So we have a 30-year roughly fuel load in the Angeles, and anytime there's anything to spark it, it goes off and it burns much more intensely than what we're prepared for.
I need to go back, revisit that. So for 25 years, they have not done prescriptive burns. And you'd mentioned
Right.
Lukens. And I was reading a book on California years ago. And apparently when the Spanish were coming up the coast, they referred to it as Tierra del Fuego, land
Valley
of
the
fire, because they would see at night, they didn't know if there were volcanoes back there, but obviously things are pretty darned incendiary. But again,
Oh, yeah.
knowing that controlled burns prevent major burns for 25 years, Steve, no prescriptive burns was it just LA County or across California that you're aware of?
Across Southern California. And basically, it's criminal negligence. I mean, everybody knew or should know that chaparral is equivalent when it burns. It's equivalent in burning power to gasoline, weight for weight. So imagine you've got millions of pounds of chaparral in the mountains, and you just never let any private owners thin. That's the other thing they did is they prevented private owners in the hillsides from thinning out their brush. They made it extremely expensive and time consuming to get a permit, for environmental reasons or something. Not realizing that the environmental cycle here is actually, destruction and replacement of the brush on a regular basis. So they did that. They willfully did that. I mean, and lots of us, not just me, and I did, but a lot of other people too, wrote various people in government and said, "Hey, look, this is dangerous." And basically, we never got a response. So then, to compound that craziness, Edison Company is a monopoly contractor with the state and the county, and it's kind of complex how it works. But there's a state law that allows and regulates counties to enter into or cities to enter into monopoly contracts with electrical providers. And the state law and the contract govern the content of the providers. And here the state law requires that unused equipment be removed and that there be 10-foot brush clearance around all the towers. And the tower, the Edison Tower that sparked the fire, and they finally have pretty much admitted that it was their equipment, that tower was abandoned 50 years ago. And it was supposed to have been taken down when it was.
The tower. Now, how does an abandoned tower spark a fire then, Steve?
Okay. Fascinating thing, and I never knew this, but the electrical wires that you see running through the San Gabriel Mountains on the towers, they are unshielded, which means they're just raw aluminum.
Interesting.
And so when the wind blows real hard, they kind of get close to each other, and they get close to other metal objects, and they just spark off. They induct to the metal objects. And what happened with this tower that was supposed to be down is it inducted to the tower that did not have any power to it, but the tower next to it, like basically in the wind, inducted electricity to it. It went down to the ground through the ground wire, which it's supposed to do, but the ground wire was open to the air because they'd never done any maintenance there and there had been erosion, and so the ground was exposed, and the ground came out right where there was a bunch of brush, and it just the spark from that ground lit all the brush on fire in a 80-mile-an-hour wind. And that's what sparked the Altadena fires. And we have a unique situation in California where if a utility is declared to be, what's the term? I can't remember the term. It'll take me a second. But it's a prudent utility. If they're declared a prudent utility by the state commission, they can't be sued for starting these fires. And basically, the commission just re-signs everyone who's got a monopoly contract as a prudent utility. They found 28 different citations on this one set of towers in Altadena, 3 of which led directly to the fire. But even though that was in their report, they got called a prudent utility.
28 citations on one tower.
On these 3 towers that were together at this one location, yeah.
Oh my gosh! And they've been
And
around there. They've not been utilized since the 50s.
One of them had not been utilized. One of the 3 had not been utilized since the 50s. It was supposed to have been taken down back then, and it wasn't. And but and the reason for this is really, really clear. If you look at politicians' campaign records in California, everybody gets a large donation from Edison and their top 3 or 4 executives every year. And they also, even the ones who aren't regulating PG&E, which is Pacific Gas and Electric, they get donations from them too. So the monopoly power companies are the major donors to all California local and state politicians.
Wow. And hence, nothing changes with regard to
Nothing
that.
changes. I mean, they renewed. I was at the meeting by accident. I was going for a different land use issue, but I was at the meeting where the LA County Board of Supervisors renewed Edison's monopoly contract. And this was 2 or 3 years ago. And after they had burned down by then 5 or 6 cities, we just sailed right through. After they knew that they had like already been in violation of their contract for like 60 years, just sailed right through. Not a problem. I mean, hardly even any discussion.
Wow. Well, Steve, I want to turn the conversation to fire department failures. But before I do that, we showed the audience pictures of your lovely home there in Altadena. What I'd
Yeah.
like to do is give them a feel for the devastation that you and roughly, total of 13,000 homeowners experience, 13,000 plus homeowners experience throughout LA County. But I believe Altadena took the brunt with it of roughly 8,000 homes, Steve?
9,500 roughly homes.
9,500
Yeah.
homes. Wow.
Well, homes and businesses. Yeah. So, but it's roughly 20,000 people. It's 42% of the town's population is displaced, dispossessed.
And I want to talk about at the end. I really want to, when we're talking about to build or rebuild or not to rebuild. I really want to go into, it's going to sound like a conspiracy theory, but seems to be working its way through there. But here, let's take a look at some photos. I want to share some photos again with the audience. So we saw that was the view from your living room window,
Living room. Yeah.
and here we go.
So that's looking from Ventura Street north, where my fence used to be, and where you see the burned up tree. Between the burned up tree and the fence was my house. That big pile of ash is the house. There's my
Wow.
41 Lincoln Continental burned out in the
Now,
in the
you had been
background there.
restoring that for the past few years.
Yeah, and it had its gas tank out because it was leaking. I had just gotten a new stainless steel one on the night of the 7th. I put it in the kitchen to unbox it the next morning and put it in the car when the wind died down. And well, we never got around to that.
My gosh. And there, another
That's
scene.
looking at my house towards my neighbor's house. We had just remodeled my neighbor's garage into a music studio and added a bathroom to his house. And his, you can't really see it in the photographs, but his garage was really a total loss. It came in through the roof and
Oh,
then
right. I could
burned
see
the
that
entire
little bit of
interior.
burn there in the roof.
Yeah, burned out the entire interior, and they've since the garage has fallen down.
Wow.
So that's
Another
yeah,
shot.
and that's looking from where the house was towards my studio building. As you can see, the studio building is completely gone.
Wow. And again,
That's looking again at the studio building.
wow. Well, there you go, Steve. It's what an incredible loss. And you sent me some photos of the ferocity of the fire itself. There are a few more photos, but there, I mean, it looks like an apocalypse.
Jeanette and I fought the fires from 5 in the morning when we woke up until 10:30 when the police told me if I didn't leave, they would send me to jail. And it never looked like it was daylight. It looked like it was midnight the whole time from all the smoke. The smoke blocked out the sun completely. It was just the most amazing, uh, bizarre experience you can imagine.
My
There
gosh.
were embers the size of baseball gloves flying through the air in the 100-mile-an-hour wind like they were feathers, landing on
Wow.
everything. Yeah.
So, they're saying it was just this fluke of high winds, but as you pointed out, they had not been doing the prep work, the work for 25 years to mitigate the damage fires might cause. But talk to me about the response of LA County Fire.
What response?
Oh, jeez.
There's no response. Those cake crunching little bastards who are running around talking about what heroes they are, they stood down at the end of my block in their truck and watched as residents tried to fight the fire with garden hoses. The only homes that got saved in this fire got saved by residents with garden hoses or residents who had swimming pools and diesel or gasoline fuel pumps, water pumps. And when the fire was burning at 8 o'clock the night before, and they decided it was dangerous, they were all gathered at Farnsworth Park up at the top of the lake for their command center, and they decided it was too dangerous for them to stay there. So they decamped to the Rose Bowl, several miles away and outside of Altadena, and didn't notify the neighbors that it was too dangerous for the firemen to stay. They just left. And there were hardly any notifications to Altadenans, partly because the power had gone out. Edison had turned the power off to us the night before. And so all the modems were down, so your computer wasn't working. The cell towers were going in and out. Sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't. And so there was really no way except for going through police cars to notify people. And like I said, I can't find an Altadenan 101 days out who will say to me, I saw a firefighter fighting the fire in our neighborhoods. They won't say that because it didn't happen. It just straight up didn't happen. And I've been told by some neighbors that they were told by firemen that they had standing orders not to fight structure fires in a wildfire. I can't
Standing
confirm
orders
that.
not to fight structural fires in a wildfire.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any
I
reason
can't
for
get anyone
that?
officially to confirm.
Any reason for that?
I would guess, like, if you were up in the hills, you wouldn't want the fire to, like, loop around you and trap you because you were trying to fight to save some guy's house that was, like, on an acre of land. But, I watched as the fire was burning down Ventura Street. It was in the middle of the block on the north side. It came all the way to Olive, and then it crossed the street, and then it crossed to Mountain View, which was south of us. And I'm like running around with my hose and with other neighbors' hoses, turning their hoses on, like putting water on their gardens, putting water on their trees, putting water on their roofs. And the firemen are just down the street sitting there watching as the fire is spreading in my neighborhood, doing nothing. Nothing. Directing traffic away from the fire, but doing nothing.
And Steve, there were reports that hydrants weren't working. There wasn't the reservoirs weren't full that would supply the water to fight the fires. What do you say about all that?
Well, that was in Los Angeles. That was in
Okay.
Los Angeles.
That was the
And I know
Palisades
that,
fire.
yeah, that was the Palisades fire. Now, I know that in central Altadena, well, Altadena's a very weird place. It's got shareholder-owned water companies. So they're not a municipal water company. It's not a county water company. They're these ancient things from the 1880s. You have shares in the water company. And so in central Altadena, that was serviced by Rubio Canyon Water Company. Well, Rubio, unfortunately, their pumping station was up in the canyon. And the first area that burned out in central Altadena was the canyon where their pumping station was. So there was no water in central Altadena at all. Where I was, we were serviced by Lincoln Avenue Water Company. I had tons of water. They didn't even crack the hydrants, though. But even worse than that, a block and a half south of me, all the water a block and a half south of me in the commercial district is supplied by Pasadena Water. And they had water the whole time. And the fire engines like never hooked up their tenders and like took the Pasadena water and supplied it to other trucks in a relay. They never did anything like that. They never tried anything like that. They just let it burn.
Wow. Steve, that's just despicable
Well, there are more
and
than a few of
cowardly.
us who don't think it was an accident.
Let's
And
let's talk about that. Let's talk
okay,
about the what may or may not have been policy before and during the fire, and then what is going on in terms of policy barriers that are preventing
right.
people from getting back to good, getting back to where they were.
So there's been a fight over the future of Altadena for at least 40 years. And the fight has been between the people of Altadena and the Department of Regional Planning. Altadena is a sort of, or was until the fire, a semi rural kind of place. People were very individualistic. Um, I would say at least half the homes in Altadena had additions without permits on them. We kind of had a leave us alone sort of lifestyle. And we had all lived in our homes a long time. So we were under Prop 13. We were paying low property taxes. When you would talk to people in the county, they would literally seethe with resentment that you lived in Altadena where you weren't paying your fair share of property taxes. Of course, my view after the fire is if you pay anything, you pay too damn much. But anyhow, um, so they also had a plan to densify
Right.
Altadena. And we
Getting
didn't
back to
even.
the property tax, that's because
Mhm.
with Prop 13 in California, you only got significantly reassessed when there was a change of ownership. So if people are holding on to their properties, they're going to be paying at whatever rate it was that they had. Either Prop 13 was initiated or there was a change of ownership, correct?
Well, that's kind of not exactly true. Like in my case, we owned the property for almost 38 years, right? So when we first owned the property, our property taxes were $890 a year. And last year they were 2,200 bucks. Well, actually almost 2,300 bucks. Okay. So even though I was under Prop 13 and even though my taxes were low, it's still over that 30 years like almost tripled. And I fixed all the potholes in my street. The county didn't. I suppose they provided sewer service. Obviously, the fire protection I was paying for, I really didn't get. So anyway, but the county had this plan to densify Altadena, and we only found out that we would have like in state law, you're required every 10 years to do a new community plan. That's part of a general plan. And whenever we would do one of these things, the community would come together and we would say, we want to keep Altadena like it is. We don't want any development really. We just want to stay semi-rural. And the county would always, no matter what we said, the final draft document would always include a lot more development than what we wanted. And we would protest and they would just go, yeah, pound sand, this is what you're getting. And 30 years ago, Ken Balder and I, who were enemies on the town council and in the chamber, I mean, we were on both boards and we were like this all the time. But we decided that the only way Altadena was going to get like some boutique restaurants and shops was to get past the county parking requirements because Altadena's commercial districts were built during the streetcar era in the 1890s to 1920 range. So they didn't really have what we would consider to be adequate parking today. So we decided to try to count every parking space within a block of Lake Avenue, all the parking spaces in back of the business, and to try to get the county to hold those spaces in common for permits. And we submitted our report counting all the spaces, saying where they were, saying, how we could adjust the timing of stuff. And the county planning department came back and said, well, that's not the plan for Altadena. The plan for Altadena is high density residential with commercial at the intersection nodes. And we all protested and screamed like crazy. And they said, oh my, we misspoke. But in the last community plan, they basically, with the help of a lot of not-for-profits, crammed that zoning through our throats. And that's what we had
So
about
it's
5 years
almost
ago.
like they were pushing density.
They've been pushing density for 30, 40 years against the will of most of the population. And so what they did literally 3 weeks before the fires is they
Okay,
passed this
3
thing
weeks
called,
before the fires, what did they
yeah,
do?
they adopted the West San Gabriel Valley Area Plan, which basically doesn't allow any development in the foothills, but it transferred all the potential development and then some down into the Altadena sort of community. So down in my neighborhood, down on Lake. So the whole city got, or the whole town got rezoned for more density. And then, oh, strangely enough, the fires come and the fire department has a stand down order.
Wow. So of roughly 50,000, a municipality of 50,000 people, 20,000 people in the less dense regions get burnt out of their homes. And very interesting. So let's talk. I want to show, there was a clip because just after the fires, President Trump visited L.A. County. He had a bit of a
Right.
tete-a-tete with Mayor Karen Bass, who we probably don't have time enough to get into in this.
I want to say something good about Karen Bass, which is like,
Oh,
almost enough
okay.
to make me scratch and hives. LA traditionally is a very difficult place to get a permit out of. The city of Los Angeles has issued 30 permits for rebuilding in Pacific Palisades. LA County has issued one.
So
So,
relatively speaking, of the
so I hate to say anything good about Karen Bass and about the city government of Los Angeles, but they are doing a much better job of facilitating rebuilding for their citizens than LA County is.
wow, and the county commissioners, because Altadena is a unincorporated town, correct? In the
Yes,
county.
unincorporated. So we have a board of supervisors. And, our supervisor, Catherine Barger, who's a friend of mine, she's trying really hard, or at least she was in the beginning, but she's getting totally rolled by the bureaucracy. I mean, they're just like digging their heels in and saying, I'm civil service, and no.
Wow. Well, I'm going to
Yeah.
play that clip, Steve. Here we go.
Okay.
And let me know if you can't hear this.
Okay.
And they want to go in. The people are all over the place. They're standing, and I say, why aren't you going in? We're trying to get a permit. And the permit's going to take them, everybody said 18 months. You said 18 months. You said 18 months.
That was last night.
And that was last night.
On that. Right. That was the first time.
Yesterday.
Mr. President, we're going to be together next week, and during the interim, many of us are involved in, and Tom McClintock, who you know has been an expert on this for years.
That's right.
We are going to be putting conditions on the money that do two things: require that it be done timely and affordable, and then secondly, that we protect those who will come afterwards. As we speak, there are 6,000 acres burning in my district on the Mexican border. There will be more fires until we include in any disaster relief items which will prevent it or at least mitigate it from happening again. So you're going to see us proposing both of those.
Like water.
All right. We'll go back here. Let me get back to... So there we go. So what is going on? What is this permitting process like, Steve? What's it been like for you? What is it like for others? You had mentioned obviously the county is being less responsive than the city, but overall it is California and Southern California where it's always been difficult to build. Are any allowances being made for those who've lost their homes?
If you listen to the county, they will tell you that they are moving heaven and earth. If you listen to people who are trying to figure out how they're allowed to rebuild and how they're going to afford to rebuild with all of the new demands the county is placing on them and all the new cost, they're being locked out of their own communities.
What are some examples of these
They're
kinds of
requiring
costs?
every new home to have solar. And the Board of Supervisors, to their credit, they wrote the governor and the legislature and asked for relief from this, like Paradise, California got. And they just haven't responded. Neither the governor nor the legislature have responded. And so, we have to have solar. There's talk that they may not let us have gas appliances if we don't get our permits in by January 1st. We have to have electric ready, which means we have to have 220-volt outlets near where all of our gas appliances are. We have to have dedicated space inside the wall of the structure for our water heater, our HVAC, all that kind of stuff. So that just consumes a tremendous amount of space when you're trying to rebuild. And we're only allowed to rebuild in the like for like, the same number of square feet. But of course, the like for like that you're getting doesn't resemble the house that you had in any way. I just got hit with a new one this week that I have to have the front door face the street with a roof articulation that differentiates the front door area from the rest of the house, and a certain size landing, and the landing has to be different than the other paving, I guess, so that Ray Charles can find the front door. I don't know. And it just goes on and on and on.
And in normal times, it's almost like self-flagellation trying to get something through LA County permitting. I was involved in that warehouse project, you might recall, and God bless him, the one cousin who was doing the majority of the work. I was there one day. I walk in, and he has got this mallet, and he is just slamming this piece of steel, and he's just swearing up a storm. I'm like, hey, anything wrong? And he goes, you better get away. He had just come from the county. He had a shopping cart full of plans that I guess they just crapped all over after telling him, no, you do this and this, you'll be good. But it's like, it's
well, yeah, I'm because I've been around so long, I know a bunch of the department heads, right? So I've been emailing them. So there's an electronic record of my correspondence with them. And I've been saying, hey, can I do this? Can I do that? Can I do the other? And the answer changes every 48 hours. I'll say, well, is this permissible? And they'll say, oh, yes. And then they'll write me back 2 days later and said, oh, I checked with some people, and no, that's not permissible, or no, that's not how this works, or why don't you just give us a permit fee and apply, and we can discuss it. And, the like for like, nobody knows what the like for like really is. They're just well, bring in your plans and we'll decide. There's no fixed regulations. And they think that this like for like thing is doing us some big grand favor, but they can't tell us what the favor is.
Well, Steve, the audience saw pictures of your lovely home prior to the fire. And if you walked in with a plan for your home and your studio, which would be like for like, this is what was there, I just want to get back to good. No way, huh?
No. Well, I can't get back to good on the house because the house was, an ancient building technique called single wall. So it was a redwood board and a redwood board and a redwood board with cleats over it. And so that has no R value. So I have to meet the energy code, I have to go with 6-inch thick walls, studs 16 on center, all this insulation. But that reduces, I'm only allowed the footprint, 110% of the footprint of what I had before. But when you add those thick walls, it significantly reduces the interior size of the house. Those
Wow.
thick walls plus all the interior, mandated size for future electrical heat pumps and stuff. I mean, it's impossible. So there is no going home. And
So
my studio has to meet the new energy code, even though it's not going to have any heating and cooling in it, because, well,
you're
the
in
state
Southern
just decided
California.
all buildings will. Yeah, it's California, right? And I mean, the crazy thing about my studio was when I rebuilt it after the arsonist, I fully insulated it. So it had an R30 roof. It had R19, which was really good then. Now the minimum's R25, but it had R19 insulation in the walls. It had R25 in the floors, right? And I like I never heated it, I never cooled it, I never had to. But that doesn't matter. I will comply with the energy code. I don't get to make my own windows and doors anymore. I have to buy certified windows and doors, which are ugly and cost thousands of dollars. I made my own out of like one by redwood that I planed down and glued together into like 2.5 inch thick doors and windows. No, not allowed.
Wow.
Everything has to be certified. Very, very expensive. And then they're trying to place the wildland urban interface codes on us. I think that's what that guy was talking about when he was talking about we're going to protect people in the future. He wasn't talking about we're going to make the state of California let us reduce the fuel load. He was talking about we're going to put more responsibility on the individual homeowner. We're going to regulate what your plantings can be, how close they can be to your house, how you have to trim them in the future, what your siding can be, whether or not you're going to have drywall underneath your exterior siding and underneath your roofing to make it fire resistive and very heavy, by the way, and very prone to water damage. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, layering on and loading on the expenses to rebuild. And this is a town that the county understood at the beginning of all this was underinsured, and they're just like, no, our codes, you're going to comply.
Wow, that's tragic because when I was in living in LA, I lived, for those who don't know, I lived in Los Angeles County for 20 years. That's where you and I and Jeanette met. We became really good friends. We became political activists. We were, you know, you're still the crotchety old guy from Altadena, according to the Pasadena newspapers.
Yeah, according to the Pasadena Star News, I'm the chief crank of Altadena, which is considering the source, I take that as a very
Badge of
honorable
honor.
title. Yeah,
But
badge of honor.
it it just is amazing to me because when I was living there, for a short period of time, I worked in the Red Cross and I was supervising, volunteers who would do damage assessment. And the whole idea is to get people back to where they were. No one cashes in, but you get back to good, back to where you were. And that doesn't seem to be the priority or the point. And it brings me to my last question for you then, Steve, is, are you guys going to rebuild or are you going to move on? What do you think?
I don't know. This week I was on a Zoom call with a bunch of activists, and we were talking with people from Paradise and other fires. Paradise was like 6 or 7 years ago. They've let building permits for 33% of the units, but they've only rebuilt 25%. And that's because the code people have shown no mercy. They have just been, you will comply, and it's overwhelming. And I rebuilt my studio after an arsonist burned it when I was fighting Lavinia, and that took my brother and I. Of course, we were also working during that time and still kept fighting Lavinia, but it took us 3 years doing it ourselves. And I'm 68 years old, and when I work 6 hours a day hanging moldings at my neighbor's job next door, I mean, it just almost killed me. And I don't think at the age of 70 or 72, I'm going to be slamming nails. And my brother's got arthritis. He can't slam nails with me. So I just, with all these additional costs loaded on and with my age, and the fact that I don't have enough insurance to rebuild the house, let alone the house and the studio, and with the fact that all the bushes are burned literally to the ground. So my garden's not going to come back during my lifetime the way it was. And the fact that there are tons of investors buying Altadena property now, and that this means a major change in the culture, and the fact that the California Senate is considering a bill that will allow hyper-dense construction by right in any residential neighborhood close to a bus station, and that includes my neighborhood. I just don't know, after I go through all that more suffering, if it's going to be worth it. If there's going to be anything that resembles the Altadena I once knew when I'm done. So I'm still exploring rebuilding, but I'm also thoughtfully looking for other communities that are like Altadena was.
Wow. Wow. It's you just made me think of when I was a kid. I grew up on a small farm in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and our neighbors were the Landises. And the Landises had been on that piece of property for 5 generations.
Wow.
And they got caught up in the whole get big or get out. And I remember my friend Stevie Landis, who was a couple years older than me. We had a local newspaper at the time, and they were being interviewed. And he said, you know, there's been a Landis here for 5 generations, and there will not be a 6th.
No, I mean, my brother's kids most definitely are going to leave California. That's, you know, they're in their 20s. They don't see a future here for them. And, you know, as I look at rebuilding, I think, well, all my friends except Rick and Dave Smith have either died or they've moved out of California, or they've moved somewhere far away in California. And, you know, a lot of the young people who are replacing them, they kind of really don't have our values. I mean, they're lefties like we were, but they don't have the kind of leave me alone, and they don't have the kind of I'm going to do it myself, and they don't have the kind of my life is a work of art and my property is a work of art, and that's individual kind of attitude that we had. And I just don't, looking forward, I just don't know if I'm going to want to live in the Irvine diversion of Altadena.
Wow. Wow. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. Sorry for both you and Jeanette. This is an enormous tragedy.
Well, not just for me. I mean, and not just for the 9,500 of us who got burned out, but for everyone else who didn't, too. It's a horrendous tragedy for the entire town.
Wow. You're right. Absolutely right. Well, Steve, I want to thank you. I know this is a deeply personal issue for you. There's still a lot of pain, a lot you're working through on this. So I want to thank you for taking this time out to share this story with me and the audience. And, you know, certainly is, you know, I know if there, you know, I know you haven't done a GoFundMe yet or anything, Steve, but certainly if you decide to, we're going to help you out, do whatever we can. And, you know, through it all, you've been there. You're still you're the leader of our organization. And, you know, I'd like to think that what you're saying has some gravitas on the national level, and maybe we can get others outside of California to look at this vacuum of leadership that's going on and not allowing people to get back to good. I mean, your governor, unfortunately, has taken to doing podcasts as opposed to taking to getting down and visiting with people and seeing what he can do to make things
No,
right.
he's done some political stops. He's done some campaign stops in Altadena. But, you know, he hasn't responded to the Board of Supervisors. And, you know, I've been talking to to some people who are extremely left. I mean, they voted for Kamala Harris. They wept when Donald Trump was elected president. Altadenans, and they're looking at the situation and they're honestly saying the only hope we have is if Donald Trump and his administration steps in and forces California to do right by us. I mean, I never thought I would have heard these words from these people. And, you know, they're going to have to condition all the aid to California to relief from some of our crazy codes. And they're going to have to condition all the aid to California mandating quick approval process. You know, San Diego has a process where the architects or the engineers can like self-certify. They just like file the plans with the county. They don't even have the county review it. Without even knowing that San Diego had that plan, I suggested it to Catherine Barger, and that went absolutely nowhere. But we know it's legal because San Diego's been doing it for 20 years. And if we do that, that would take 6-7 months off people's rebuild time, just like that.
Wow.
Boom.
And probably cut the costs as well. So,
Kev, I really want to thank you for hosting this podcast. You know, we Altadenans have been subjected to an endless series of public meetings where all the questions have had to be pre-approved, and none of us have been able to really say in public anywhere or in the media anywhere, because the media has been editing it, our fire department failed us. Our county is not helping us. You know, the state government is making it harder. And I just feel so privileged that you've allowed me to like say that in public, because I and all the rest of the Altadenans have been prevented from actually publicly telling the world what's happening to us and what happened to us. So, Kevin, thank you so much.
Always
it makes
a pleasure,
it more of an
Steve.
honor to serve.
Well, it's thank you for your leadership with this organization, and we're going to do everything we can to expose what is going on. And for those of you who are our guests today, I want to thank all of you for being here with us today. If you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to give us that thumbs up. That tells the algorithm that you want to see more. People want to see more of this content. If you're watching us on the X platform, give us some love. And if you're watching us on Substack, be sure to restack us, because you know, we want to grow our base so we can, again, as we're exposing this, get it to as wide an audience as possible. And again, I want to thank thank you for joining us today, and have a great day, a wonderful Easter weekend, and a great year. Take care now. Bye-bye.